My name is Alara. It's a name my mother, Clara, chose, she said, because it sounded like starlight, something ethereal and hopeful. I used to try and live up to that, to be a soft glow in the lives of those I loved. For a long time, my world was illuminated by my husband, Liam. His laughter was the rhythm of our home, his hand in mine a constant reassurance. Then, 18 months ago, a sudden heart condition, swift and merciless, stole him away, leaving a gaping silence where music used to be. Now, it's just me and our daughter, Lily, who is 9 years old and possesses a wisdom far beyond her years, her eyes the same deep sapphire as her father's. The world tilts when your anchor is gone. Grief is a relentless tide, pulling you under just when you think you've found purchase on the shore. My family, my well-meaning parents, Clara and Thomas, my younger brother, Ethan, and his immaculately put-together wife, Sophie, they saw me adrift. They believed they had the perfect lifeline, a family retreat to Redwood Serenity Park. Whispers of ancient trees, the clear, still waters of Mirror Lake, and a blessed absence of phone signals. It was presented as a balm for the soul, an immersion in nature's embrace. In those early days of raw sorrow, their concern felt like a warm blanket, a promise of shared burdens. It felt like love. That feeling, however, proved to be as fragile as a dried autumn leaf, ready to crumble at the slightest pressure. One crystalline morning, I awoke not to the chirping of birds or the gentle murmur of a waking camp, but to an unnerving, profound stillness. The sturdy canvas tents that had housed my parents and Ethan and Sophie were gone. Their cars vanished. The coolers brimming with food, the camping gear meticulously organized by Ethan, all of it had disappeared as if swallowed by the earth. No signal on my phone, of course. That had been part of the charm of the place. Just Lily, sleeping soundly beside me in our small tent, and one solitary item left on the rough-hewn picnic table, a piece of notepaper, folded precisely, weighted down by a smooth gray stone. Ethan's familiar, angular handwriting. Forgive us. This path is necessary. A cruel jest? An elaborate, misguided prank? Or was it the chilling prologue to a story I couldn't yet fathom? A darkness far deeper than the shadowed forest floor? If you find your breath catching, wondering how a family could inflict such a wound, then perhaps you'll understand the chasm that opened within me. Let me share with you what unfolded in those 10 days embraced by the unforgiving wilderness, and the quiet, steely truths I unearthed about the people I once believed were my forever. When profound loss strikes, everyone around you seems to develop an instant, unsolicited expertise in navigating grief. Alara, you need a change of scenery, darling. You should pour all your energy into Lily. You can't keep cocooning yourself away like this. The words, offered with varying degrees of sincerity, became a dull hum in the background of my days. Perhaps they held a sliver of truth. It had been nearly 2 months since Liam's memorial, 2 months since the vibrant colors of my life had muted to shades of gray. Willow Creek books and tea, the little haven Liam and I had nurtured from a single dream into 3 cozy shops scattered across Ashwood, felt like a hollow shell. Its warm wooden shelves, the scent of old paper and brewing Earl Grey, it was all a reminder of him, of shared smiles over steaming cups and whispered plans for the future. Success, I was learning, felt achingly empty when the one person you wanted to share it with was gone. But Lily was there. My bright, resilient Lily, a little girl bravely shouldering an invisible weight. "Mummy," she'd said one evening, her small hand resting on my arm as I stared, unseeing, at a plate of food I hadn't touched, "You didn't eat your shepherd's pie. It's your favorite." I'd managed a weak smile from the quiet of the balcony overlooking our small garden. "Not very hungry, sweet pea. Then perhaps some chamomile tea?" she'd persisted gently. "Daddy always said tea couldn't solve the big problems, but it made your hands feel warm while you thought about them." That was Lily. Her voice, a soft melody, her eyes, Liam's legacy. No histrionics, no childish demands. Just a quiet strength, holding herself together because she sensed me fraying at the edges. Just the weekend, Alara, 2 nights, my mother, Clara, had urged, her hand clasping mine with a pressure that was meant to be reassuring but felt more like a constraint. Ethan's planning everything. Tents by the lake, stories around the campfire, absolutely no work talk, no phones. "You're not serious, are you?" I'd responded, the words sharper than I intended. "I'm barely managing to put one foot in front of the other, and your grand solution is to stick me in a sleeping bag in the middle of nowhere? Not sleeping bags, dear." Glamping, practically, my father, Thomas, added from his position by the window, his tone a little too hearty, as if trying to sell me on a sound investment. He always did have a way of framing things in terms of practical benefit. Ethan was there too, that familiar, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, with Sophie beside him, smelling faintly of expensive jasmine and looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, pity, perhaps, or a subtle impatience. "Lily will adore it," Ethan had said, his voice smooth. "And honestly, Alara, you need to get out of this quiet little box you've built around yourself." I'm not entirely sure that being stranded in the wilderness with people who seem to think grief has a 2-day expiration date is what I need, I'd retorted, a spark of my old self flickering. "Then just sit by the fire and breathe," he'd shrugged, unperturbed. "Still better than moping on your sofa in your pajamas for another weekend." They didn't engage with my logic or my pain. They used Lily, subtly, effectively. When I mentioned the proposed trip to her face, usually so pensive, lit up like the first star in the twilight sky. "Really, Mummy? Are we going to that big park Daddy told me about? The one with the sparkly lake and the giant, tall trees?" "Let's hope for sparkly lakes and tall trees, and maybe fewer bears than in his stories," I'd said, a faint smile touching my lips. "And marshmallows? Can we roast marshmallows?" "Absolutely. Mountains of marshmallows." Watching her bounce on the balls of her feet, a genuine, uncomplicated joy radiating from her, I felt a tiny, constricted part of my heart loosen. If she could find a reason to smile, then perhaps I could find the strength to try. Saturday morning arrived with a pale, watery sunrise. They collected us in 2 vehicles, Ethan and Sophie in their sleek, silver SUV, and my parents in their familiar, slightly battered estate car. Lily and I rode with Mom and Dad, sleeping bags and a small duffel of our clothes tucked in the boot, alongside coolers and canvas chairs wedged between bags of groceries. I gazed out of the window as the familiar streets of Ashwood gave way to the winding coastal road, the mist hanging like a soft veil over Cascade Bay. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I tried to convince myself I wasn't making a monumental mistake. Crossing the boundary into Redwood Serenity Park felt like stepping into another realm. The hum of the city receded, replaced by a profound, enveloping green silence. My phone, as predicted, displayed no service. It was meant to be liberating. Instead, a shiver of apprehension traced its way down my spine. We pulled into a designated campsite near the famed Mirror Lake. It was picturesque, undeniably. Sturdy picnic tables, fallen logs arranged artfully for seating, and vibrant patches of moss that Lily immediately began to investigate with the toe of her boot. "Mummy, look. A tiny fern like a miniature tree. And a beetle with shiny green wings." Ethan and Sophie unpacked with an efficiency that bordered on professional. Ethan had a small axe in hand, ready to tackle firewood before the car engine had even cooled. Sophie, ever pristine, wiped her designer sunglasses with a soft cloth. "This is it, everyone," Ethan announced with a sweeping gesture. "No emails, no news feeds, just the majestic outdoors. Just family." I managed a small, hollow laugh. Just family, as if that was an unbreakable shield, a guarantee of anything at all. They erected the tents with practiced ease. Lily, eager to contribute, helped peg down the guy ropes. I found a seat on one of the logs, cradling a thermos of lukewarm tea I'd brought from home, and watched her. She flitted between the ancient, moss-covered stones at the lake's edge, her bright jacket a splash of color against the muted greens and browns, a little woodland spirit, light and free. For a fleeting second, a fragile tendril of hope unfurled within me. Perhaps this could work. Perhaps being here, disconnected from the relentless reminders of my loss, surrounded by towering trees and people who, on the surface, professed to care, could somehow begin to mend the shattered pieces of my heart. I was so profoundly, devastatingly wrong. When someone you love departs this world, life irrevocably splits into before and after. But sometimes, very rarely, there's a pause, a moment suspended in time, as if the universe itself holds its breath and whispers, "Just be." That first evening, gathered around the crackling campfire, felt like one of those moments. I sat enveloped in a soft woolen blanket, a mug of herbal tea warming my hands, watching Lily and my nephew, 9-year-old Finn, Ethan and Sophie's son, who had arrived with them, engage in a very serious debate about the precise technique required to toast a marshmallow to golden brown perfection without it succumbing to a fiery, blackened demise. Lily's tongue was poked out in sheer concentration, her brow furrowed. Finn, his face already charmingly smeared with chocolate, gestured emphatically with his roasting stick. And I laughed. Not a polite, strained laugh designed to reassure my daughter or keep up appearances for my family, but a genuine, unbidden laugh that seemed to bubble up from a deep, forgotten well within me. From a part of myself I feared had been extinguished by the cold winds of grief. Sophie was carefully pouring steaming spiced apple cider from a large thermos into tin mugs. Ethan and my father were engrossed in a low-voiced, mock-serious argument about the optimal method for stacking firewood, a debate that seemed to be a long-standing tradition. My mother, Clara, fussed with an apron patterned with cheerful woodland creatures, an item no one quite understood the necessity of on a camping trip, but it seemed to bring her comfort. And in the midst of it all, in the warm, marshmallow-scented, crackling chaos, there was something that felt almost alive. A spark of the joy I thought had been lost to me forever. I watched their faces, illuminated by the dancing firelight, their reflections shimmering softly on the inky surface of Mirror Lake behind us, and a tentative question formed in my mind. Had I been too quick to judge them? Perhaps their suggestions, which I'd perceived as clumsy attempts to reshape my grief into something more palatable for them, were, in fact, genuine, albeit awkward, attempts to draw me out of the suffocating fog. Perhaps. That night, sleep was elusive. Lily curled beside me in our shared sleeping bag, her small body warm, her breathing soft and even. I lay there for a long time, gently stroking her hair, listening to the faint, crackling hiss of the dying embers beyond the thin canvas wall of the tent and the distant, mournful call of an owl. And then, a familiar, poignant ache twisted in my chest. Liam would have adored this. He would have been the one expertly coaxing melodies from a battered travel guitar, passing around a hip flask of good whiskey, engaging Ethan in a spirited debate about the merits of different constellation spotting apps. He would have swung Lily high into the air, her delighted squeals echoing through the trees, and later, when the stars emerged like scattered diamonds on black velvet, he would have squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the shared beauty. I didn't weep. I simply lay there, holding that bittersweet memory, that feeling, like a precious, glowing coal. Maybe this, I thought, this quiet interlude, this tentative step back into the stream of life, was a turning point. I would survive this. For Lily. For the memory of Liam. For myself. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips as I finally drifted into a restless sleep. Mummy, wake up. You have to see. The lake looks like a giant silver coin from up here. Lily was already dressed, her small hiking boots laced, a little flashlight clutched in her hand, her eyes shining with the pure, unadulterated excitement of a Christmas morning. It was barely dawn, the sky a soft pearly gray. We followed a narrow, winding trail through the towering redwoods, their ancient branches filtering the nascent light, until we reached a low, rocky ridge. From that vantage point, the view unfolded like a breathtaking watercolor painting. Mirror Lake lay below, its surface as smooth and reflective as polished obsidian, perfectly cradling the image of the surrounding evergreen forest, their tips tinged with gold by the rising sun. A delicate mist curled and eddied low over the water, like steam rising from a giant cup of ethereal tea. Beautiful, isn't it? I murmured, my arm around her small shoulders. Lily nodded, her gaze fixed on the vista. Then, very softly, she said, "It's a pity Daddy didn't get to see this." A familiar pang, yet softer this time. "I think he does, sweet pea." Her sapphire eyes, so like his, turned to me, questioning. "Really?" "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "He wouldn't miss something this beautiful for anything in the world." We held each other close for a long moment, a silent communion of love and loss and enduring connection. For that precious instant, I felt something solid coalesce within me again. Not the brittle ash of despair, but a resilient ember, waiting for the right conditions to glow. We made our way back down to the campsite around 8 o'clock, Lily chattering excitedly about a family of deer she'd spotted near the trailhead. That's when I knew, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. It wasn't an immediate, obvious alarm. At first, it was just the silence. An unnatural, heavy silence. No cheerful morning greetings, no clatter of pans from the camp stove, no rustle of sleeping bags being packed away, not even my father's customary grumbling about the morning chill. Just silence. I scanned the campsite. The larger tents, the ones belonging to my parents and Ethan and Sophie, were gone. Simply gone. The patches of flattened grass where they had stood were starkly empty. No camp stove, no coolers overflowing with food, no meticulously arranged camping gear, no silver SUV, no familiar estate car. Just our small, two-person tent, standing forlornly, and the single wooden picnic table with a solitary, forgotten mug resting upon it, as if someone had merely stepped away for a moment. "Mummy?" Lily's voice was a small, quavering whisper beside me. "Where did Nana and Grandpa go? And Uncle Ethan and Auntie Sophie?" My mind buzzed, a strange ringing in my ears, my limbs suddenly heavy, as if weighted with lead. Maybe they went to get more supplies," I said, the words sounding hollow and unconvincing even to my own ears. "Or perhaps they went for an early morning drive to see the sunrise from another spot." But even as I spoke, a cold dread was seeping into my bones. They wouldn't have left us. Not like this. Not without a word. Not without leaving food or water. It was unthinkable. "Maybe they left a note?" Lily whispered, her eyes wide and searching. She pointed a small, trembling finger towards the picnic table. There, nestled beneath a smooth, gray river stone, was a folded piece of plain white paper. Not an envelope, just a single sheet, torn rather hastily from a notepad. With shaking hands, I picked it up. I unfolded it slowly, a terrible premonition coiling in my gut. Ethan's handwriting. Neat, controlled, unmistakable. Just 5 words. "Forgive us. This path is necessary." The words didn't register at first. They were simple, almost innocuous, yet behind them lay a chasm of implications I couldn't yet grasp. I refolded the note, my fingers clumsy. Lily's eyes, wide and luminous, were fixed on my face. "Mummy, I choked on the word, swallowed against a rising tide of disbelief and dawning horror. "They've left us." But why?" Her voice was barely audible, laced with a child's pure, uncomprehending pain. And then, the full, sickening weight of it crashed down on me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Not a thoughtless oversight. This was a betrayal. Cold, deliberate, meticulously planned. "We'll be all right, my love," I whispered, pulling her into a fierce embrace, my arms a desperate shield against a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly hostile. I held her as if my grip alone could protect her from the sharp edges of this new reality. Inside me, something fractured, and then, in its place, something else began to harden. Something cold, sharp, and utterly unfamiliar. They had abandoned us in the depths of Redwood Serenity Park, miles from civilization, with no phone signal, no food, and a 9-year-old child. I looked towards the empty spaces where their cars had been parked just hours before. Only flattened grass and the faint imprint of tire tracks remained, like ghostly footprints of a departure they had intended to be final. And just like that, our 10 days of wrestling with the wild and with the wilderness of human hearts began. I don't know how long we stood there, Lily and I, enveloped in the heavy silence of the deserted campsite, staring at the empty spaces where laughter and the scent of toasted marshmallows had filled the air only the night before. Now, there was nothing but the whispering of the wind through the ancient redwoods and the chilling echo of those 5 words. The cars, the tents, the carefully packed food, even the comprehensive first aid kit Ethan had proudly displayed, all gone. All that remained was our small, solitary tent, one weathered picnic table, and that damnable note. Forgive us. This path is necessary. Lily clutched at my sleeve, her small hand a desperate anchor. She wasn't crying, not yet, but her face was pale, her lips trembling. Her sapphire eyes, usually so bright with curiosity, were clouded with confusion and a dawning fear. "Mummy," she whispered, her voice barely carrying above the rustle of leaves, Are they really not coming back for us?" I nodded slowly, a single, deliberate movement. It felt as if any faster motion might cause the fragile composure I was desperately trying to maintain to shatter completely. We took stock of our meager resources. My day pack, thankfully, had been in our tent. Inside, I found 2 half-liter bottles of water, 3 protein bars, remnants from our hike the previous morning, a small packet of tissues, a disposable lighter with perhaps half its fuel remaining, and an old, reliable compass Liam had given me years ago. That was it. Enough to perhaps delay the inevitable, but certainly not enough to sustain us. Not enough to stop the cold tendrils of fear from wrapping around my heart. "We'll make it through this, Lilybug," I said, forcing a conviction into my voice that I was far from feeling. It sounded hollow, almost foolish, even to my own ears, but it was the only piece of certainty I could offer her, the only truth I could cling to in that moment. Day 1, a decision formed amidst the chaos in my mind. Follow the small stream that trickled near the edge of the campsite. Waterways often led to larger bodies of water, sometimes to trails, occasionally to a road, to people, to something other than this suffocating isolation. We dismantled our small tent, rolling it as tightly as we could. Lily, brave and uncomplaining, wore her own little backpack, which contained her water bottle, now empty, a spare sweater, and her favorite small, smooth stone she'd picked up by the lake. I shouldered my pack, now laden with the tent and our shared sleeping bag. We must have hiked for 3, perhaps 4, arduous miles that day, the unfamiliar weight pressing down on me. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and gray, we made camp beside the whispering water. I managed to coax a small, hesitant fire to life using dry leaves and twigs. I gave Lily half of 1 precious protein bar and a few sips of water. "Mummy, aren't you going to eat?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "I had some earlier, sweet pea," I lied, the falsehood a bitter taste in my mouth. She didn't question it, just nodded, her small face serious. That life felt like a small, desperate offering, a flimsy shield against the encroaching despair. Day 2, Lily, with a child's resilience, splashed her face in the cold, clear water of the stream. Her momentary cheerfulness was a small spark in the growing gloom. I spent hours gathering dry branches and kindling, my mind a whirl of fear and a steely resolve I hadn't known I possessed. There was no food left, just the relentless forward motion, just the need to keep moving, to put distance between us and the scene of our abandonment. My muscles screamed in protest, my shoulders ached, but succumbing to the exhaustion, was simply not an option. Day 3. Hunger was no longer a fleeting sensation. It had become a constant, gnawing presence, a hollow ache deep in our bones. Lily's steps began to falter, her small face pale, dark shadows blooming like bruises beneath her eyes. We stopped earlier than I'd planned, finding a slightly sheltered spot beneath the overhang of a large, moss-covered boulder. While Lily rested, I went scavenging, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and desperation. Thank heavens for Grandma Elsie's long-ago lessons, imparted during childhood summers spent exploring the woods behind her cottage in the Cascade foothills. Her voice echoed in my memory, identifying edible plants. I found a small patch of huckleberries, their dark purple skins glistening like jewels. Then, a cluster of salal berries and a precious handful of thimbleberries, delicate and sweet. "Lily, look!" I exclaimed, triumphantly holding out my cupped hands. A small, tentative smile touched her lips, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in 2 long days. We ate the berries slowly, one by one, savoring each tiny burst of flavor as if it were a royal banquet. Day 4. More small miracles. A scattering of hazelnuts, their shells hard to crack, but the reward within worth the effort. A patch of wild chives, their oniony sent a welcome change. Lily ate with a slow, deliberate care, her eyes watching me intently. I triple-checked every leaf, every berry, every root against the fragmented memories of Grandma Elsie's teachings. Making a mistake, succumbing to the temptation of an unknown plant, was a luxury our precarious situation could not afford. We kept walking, the silence between us growing, filled only by the sounds of the forest and our own labored breathing. Words seemed superfluous, a drain on our dwindling energy. Day 5. We stumbled upon a dilapidated structure, a forgotten ranger's outpost, half collapsed, draped in cobwebs, the wood rotting and soft, but it possessed a semblance of a roof. Inside, amidst the debris and decay, a rusted tin. I pried it open with trembling fingers. Salt. Actual, precious salt. That night, a new terror emerged. Lily began to shiver violently, despite being wrapped in our shared sleeping bag. I touched her forehead. It was burning hot. "Mummy, I'm so cold," she whimpered, her teeth chattering. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I gave her sips of water, laid damp cloths I'd cooled in the stream across her brow. I frantically searched the area around the derelict hut, my memory racing, trying to recall any natural remedies. I found some willow branches, stripped the bark, and brewed a bitter, makeshift tea, praying it might possess some of the aspirin-like qualities I vaguely remembered reading about, praying even harder that I wouldn't inadvertently poison my child. Day 6. The fever clung to Lily with a stubborn tenacity. I brewed more tea, this time from dandelion greens I found growing in a sunny patch. It was bitter, possibly useless, but the act of doing something, anything, kept the tendrils of utter despair at bay. I prayed. I'm not a conventionally religious person, but in the dim, dusty confines of that forgotten hut, with my daughter's life hanging in the balance, I prayed with an intensity that shook my very soul. Day 7. The fever finally, mercifully, broke. Lily slept, a deep, healing sleep. I ventured out again, my limbs heavy with fatigue, but my spirit buoyed by a fragile hope. I gathered more berries, carrying them back carefully in the hem of my shirt. She ate a few, then slept again. I sat beside her, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, and I wept, silent tears of relief and exhaustion tracing paths through the grime on my face. Day 8. A storm descended upon us with sudden, terrifying fury. The rain wasn't a gentle shower, it was a solid, relentless wall of water. Thunder cracked overhead like artillery fire, the sound reverberating through the flimsy structure of the hut. The wind howled like a tormented spirit, threatening to tear the remaining sections of the roof away. We huddled together under our 2 sleeping bags, Lily trembling in my arms. I told her every story I could conjure from the depths of my memory, fairy tales Liam used to tell her, silly childhood anecdotes, advertising jingles from years ago, anything to distract her, to drown out the terrifying symphony of the storm. And somewhere in the roaring cacophony of thunder and wind, I thought I heard Liam's voice, calm and reassuring as it had always been in times of trouble. "You've got this, Alara. You know what to do. You're stronger than you think." Day 9. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening, but also cold and damp. As the sun tentatively broke through the clouds, I saw it, a thin, almost invisible plume of smoke rising above the distant tree line. Someone might be out there. But Lily was still weak, barely able to walk more than a few steps. I looked at her pale, trusting face. "Do you trust me, sweet pea?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She nodded, a flicker of her old spirit in her eyes. "Always, Mummy." With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, I carefully secured her into my hiking pack, her small body nestled against my back, her arms around my neck. And I walked towards that faint, ephemeral promise of smoke. Branches whipped at my face, thorns tore at my clothes and skin. My knees threatened to buckle with every step, but I kept going. A mantra formed in my mind, a rhythmic chant against the pain and exhaustion. We will make it. We will survive. They will not win. Day 10. We reached another ranger hut, this one in slightly better repair, though clearly long abandoned. Inside, I found some discarded old gear, a broken two-way radio, and a stack of yellowed newspapers. Then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic whirring sound, growing steadily louder. A helicopter. My heart leaped into my throat. I scrambled outside, my eyes scanning the sky. I remembered a survival tip from some long-forgotten documentary. If you need help, make a large H on the ground or create a smoke signal. Working with frantic haste, I gathered fallen branches, arranging them into a crude H, then covered them with scraps of the dry newspaper from the hut. I fumbled with the lighter, my hands shaking, and finally, a small flame caught, then grew, sending a plume of thick, dark smoke billowing upwards. I waved my jacket frantically, screaming until my throat was raw. The helicopter flew past, a distant speck. My heart sank. But then it circled back. It hovered overhead. A figure leaned out, waving down. "Mummy, they see us. They see us," Lily cried, her voice weak but filled with an almost unbearable relief. Tears streamed down my face, hot and cleansing. We had made it. We were alive. But as the helicopter descended, a cold certainty settled in my heart. The nightmare in the woods was over, but the true ordeal, the one that would test my soul in entirely different ways, was only just beginning. The hospital in Port Haven felt like an alien landscape after the raw immediacy of the wilderness. Clean, crisp sheets, the pervasive, sterile scent of antiseptic, the soft, rhythmic click of an 4-drip monitoring Lily. It was all too quiet, too orderly, after nights filled with the howling wind, the crackling of uncertain fires, and the sound of Lily's fevered, shallow breathing. I sat vigil by her bedside, watching her sleep beneath a blanket so white it almost hurt my eyes. She was safe. We were both safe. But I couldn't shake the oppressive feeling that the real storm, the one brewed by human deceit, had yet to truly break. On our third day in the quiet sanctuary of the hospital, a man in a meticulously tailored dark suit entered Lily's room. He had polished shoes, an air of quiet authority, and a small, official-looking badge clipped to the lapel of his blazer. "Mrs. Thorne?" he inquired, his voice calm and professional. I stood up, perhaps a little too quickly, my legs still unsteady. "Yes." He extended a hand. "Special Agent Marcus Thorne, FBI. We're conducting an inquiry into your disappearance and certain related matters that have come to light." "Related matters?" I echoed, a knot of apprehension tightening in my chest. He gestured to the vacant chair beside Lily's bed, and once seated, He opened a sleek tablet and turned the screen to face me. There it was. An image of the note, Ethan's handwriting, stark against the white paper. Forgive us. This path is necessary. This image, Mrs. Thorne, Agent Thorne began, his gaze steady and observant, was submitted by your brother, Ethan Vance, as supporting documentation in a petition to the Cedar Ridge County Court. He alleged that you authored this note, implying that you intentionally walked into the Redwood Serenity Park wilderness with your daughter, possibly due to severe depression following your husband's passing. He subsequently filed for a presumptive death ruling for both you and Lily. The air in my lungs seemed to solidify. He what? I managed to croak, the words catching in my throat. Concurrently, Agent Thorne continued, his tone remaining infuriatingly even. Mr. Vance initiated a claim on your life insurance policy, a payout valued at $750,000, and also attempted to restructure the ownership of your business, Willow Creek Books and Tea, by presenting what appears to be a recently drafted will. I straightened my spine, a flicker of cold fury cutting through the numbness. My voice, when I found it, was harder, sharper than I remembered it being. My will was signed and notarized over 3 years ago. Liam and I did it together. Everything, in the event of my death, goes to Lily, held in trust. I have never, ever signed a new one. Agent Thorne nodded slowly. We've already flagged the document presented by your brother. The signature bears noticeable discrepancies when compared to your known exemplars. The notary public whose seal appears on this newer will, a Mr. Alistair Peterson, is currently under investigation for several instances of prior professional misconduct. He is, shall we say, proving to be quite cooperative with our inquiries now. I shook my head, a wave of dizziness washing over me. They planned all of this. They chose a remote location with no mobile service. They left us with almost nothing. And while we were fighting for our lives, they were filing legal paperwork. I looked at Lily, sleeping so peacefully, oblivious to this new, insidious threat. They also submitted excerpts from your private journals, old social media posts, even selected text messages, in an attempt to build a narrative suggesting you were emotionally unstable, perhaps even a danger to yourself and your daughter. Agent Thorne confirmed, his expression unreadable. The court, acting on the information presented, issued a temporary ruling, presumed deceased, he stated. This granted your family provisional control over your estate and assets for a period of 30 days. You and Lily returned on day 10. My hands felt like blocks of ice. They calculated it all. They thought we wouldn't last that long. Agent Thorne leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Thorne, we will require your formal statements. Access to any relevant communications, documents, anything you can share with us. The more comprehensive the information we can gather at this stage, the more effectively we can proceed. I met his gaze, the last vestiges of shock giving way to a cold, hard resolve. You can have everything, I said, my voice low but firm. Everything. Later that same afternoon, I met with Amelia Hayes, a lawyer recommended by a physician at the hospital who had taken a compassionate interest in our case. Ms. Hayes was a woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes, a sharp mind, and a no-nonsense demeanor that I found immensely reassuring. She listened patiently as I recounted the events, her expression growing increasingly grave. She confirmed my deepest fears. My family had indeed moved with chilling speed. They had already attempted to freeze my personal bank accounts, had initiated proceedings to alter the limited liability company agreement for Willow Creek Books and Tea, and had even filed paperwork to transfer the title of my home, Liam's and my home, into Ethan's name. They were remarkably swift and audacious, Ms. Hayes commented, her lips pursed. But, Alara, they weren't faster than your will to survive. You and Lily getting out of that forest when you did has thrown a very large spanner in their works. It's not enough that their plan failed, I said, a tremor in my voice, but not from fear this time. It was from a deep, simmering anger. I want to press charges. For fraud, for conspiracy, for endangering our lives, for what they tried to do to Lily. And you will, Amelia Hayes stated with quiet conviction. We are already coordinating with the Cedar Ridge County Sheriff's Department and Detective Thorne's office at the FBI. They are building a strong, collaborative case. That evening, back in the quiet hospital room, I sat beside Lily's bed, her small hand nestled in mine. She looked up at me, her sapphire eyes, so like Liam's, searching my face. "Mummy," she asked, her voice small and hesitant. Did Uncle Ethan and Nana and Grandpa, did they really want us to die out there?" I met her gaze directly, without flinching. I owed her the truth, however painful. "Sweetheart, I don't know exactly what they hoped would happen, what their full, awful plan was. But I know this, they certainly didn't expect us to come back." Her small face changed, a subtle shift from childlike confusion to a surprising, quiet steeliness. "But we did, Mummy," she whispered, her fingers tightening around mine. "We're here now. They didn't win." I leaned down and kissed her forehead, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. "No, my brave girl," I murmured against her soft hair. "They absolutely did not win." That night, long after Lily had drifted back to sleep, I began to write my official statement. I attached copies of everything I could think of, old emails from Ethan that, in retrospect, hinted at his covetous nature, records of strange, unsettling voicemails from my mother in the weeks leading up to the trip, a photograph of the note they had left. Its 5 chilling words seared into my memory, even Sophie's unusually effusive messages urging me to embrace the digital detox of the park. Tomorrow, the formal investigation would begin in earnest. And this time, I vowed I would not be the one left behind, silenced and erased. This time, my voice would be heard. The next time I saw Ethan, Sophie, and my parents, Clara and Thomas, it wasn't in the comforting chaos of a family gathering or the hushed, sterile corridors of the hospital. It was in the cold, impersonal environment of the Cedar Ridge County District Attorney's office, within a soulless gray conference room. Venetian blinds cast stark, striped shadows across the polished table, and bottles of water were lined up with an almost surgical precision, like props in a poorly rehearsed play. They sat across from me, the people who had, with chilling calculation, attempted to obliterate me and my 9-year-old daughter from the ledger of the living. Ethan stared fixedly at the tabletop, his usual smirk conspicuously absent. Sophie, however, was a portrait of icy composure, not a single strand of her ash-blonde hair out of place, her expression carefully neutral. My father, Thomas, looked older, more careworn than I'd ever seen him, his gaze directed at the worn linoleum floor. My mother, Clara, dabbed at her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief, but her tears, I knew with a sudden, sharp clarity, were for herself, not for us. They were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "Elara, we thought you were," my mother began, her voice quavering slightly. "No," I interjected, my own voice surprisingly steady, devoid of the tremor I felt deep inside. "You hoped we wouldn't come back." Amelia Hayes, my lawyer, placed a thick, meticulously organized file on the table between us. She opened it with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness, like a seasoned card player laying out an unbeatable hand. "The Cedar Ridge County Court," she began, her tone crisp and professional, received a petition from Mr. Ethan Vance, declaring his sister, Elara Thorne, and her minor daughter, Lily Thorne, to be presumed deceased. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the stuffy room. This petition was accompanied by a handwritten note, submitted as evidence, purportedly authored by Mrs. Thorne, indicating her intention to willingly disappear into the wilderness. Concurrently, claims were filed against Mrs. Thorne's life insurance policy, and a document, presented as her revised last will and testament, was submitted, transferring significant assets and primary ownership of her business, Willow Creek Books N.T., to Mr. Vance. Ethan's voice, when he finally spoke, was strained, almost a whisper. We were following what we believed to be the correct procedure. The note, it looked like a final goodbye. We thought she'd given up. With her 9-year-old daughter in tow, I turned my gaze directly on him, my voice dangerously soft. And not a single one of you found that scenario even remotely questionable? Sophie, ever the pragmatist, jumped in, her voice clinical, devoid of emotion. Alara, you were in a very dark place after Liam's death. We were all worried. You yourself posted some rather disturbing things online. You spoke of feeling like you were drowning, that you couldn't see a future. A dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. So, your compassionate response to my profound grief was to orchestrate an elaborate scheme involving insurance fraud and forgery? My father finally looked up, his eyes pleading. We never intended to hurt you, Alara. We were scared. You weren't yourself. We thought we were protecting Lily, securing her future. Amelia Hayes coolly slid a document across the table. The signature on this purported new will does not match Mrs. Thorne's authenticated signature. We have already submitted it for forensic graphological analysis. The notary public whose seal appears on this document, Mr. Alistair Peterson, is currently under federal review for unrelated matters and has indicated a willingness to cooperate fully with this investigation. The FBI, as you may be aware, has an active file open on this case. Ethan fell silent, his face ashen. Sophie clenched the plastic water bottle in her hand so tightly that her knuckles shone white. My mother let out a small, choked sob, but it elicited no sympathy from me. Later that day, I received an official notification via email from the corporate bank that handled the accounts for Willow Creek Books and Tea. All account activity had been frozen, pending legal clarification. Amelia Hayes had already filed for temporary protection of all business assets and the existing corporate structure. Any changes initiated by my so-called family during our 10-day absence were now, effectively null and void. 10 days. That's all the time it had taken them. 10 days to file legal documents to have us declared dead, to begin the process of claiming a $750,000 life insurance payout, to present a forged will, and to attempt to seize control of my business shares and personal bank accounts. They hadn't mounted a search, not even a token, perfunctory effort for appearance's sake. They hadn't needed to. They knew exactly where we were, because they were the ones who had left us there, adrift in the vast, indifferent wilderness. That night, Lily and I were finally home, discharged from the quietude of Port Haven Hospital 2 days earlier. Our little house in Ashwood, usually a place of comfort and familiarity, felt both strange and sacred. Lily lay curled on the sofa, enveloped in a soft fleece blanket Liam had bought her years ago, clutching a mug of warm milk and honey. "Mummy," she asked, her voice a soft murmur in the dimly lit room, "did they really, truly think we were gone forever?" I sat beside her, gently stroking her hair, the simple, repetitive motion a balm to my own frayed nerves. I nodded slowly. "Yes, sweet pea. They didn't just think it. I believe they desperately wanted it to be true." A small frown creased her brow. "But we came back." A genuine smile, the first truly light-hearted one in what felt like an eternity, touched my lips. "Yes, my brave little adventurer. We certainly did." The following morning, I provided a comprehensive, sworn statement to the lead investigator at the district attorney's office. I recounted everything, from the way Ethan had meticulously planned the camping trip, his unusual insistence on the remote location, to the sickening, disorienting shock of waking up in an empty, silent campground. I turned over the original note, the one that Ethan had so callously left behind, its 5 words a chilling testament to their betrayal. I provided photographs of our meager supplies, copies of my business contracts, and, most importantly, my authentic, legally executed will from 3 years prior, which clearly and unequivocally named Lily as my sole heir, with trusted friends designated as trustees. The investigator, a quiet, methodical woman named Ms. Davies, already had a detailed timeline emerging. Mr. Peterson, The notary who had so recklessly and illegally stamped the forged will was, as Agent Thorne had indicated, cooperating fully with the authorities, his testimony painting a damning picture of coercion and promised financial incentives. A preliminary report from a forensic handwriting expert had confirmed significant discrepancies between my known signature and the one on the fraudulent document. Their meticulously crafted, cold-hearted plan was unraveling with satisfying speed. That evening, a local news channel ran a segment on our story. The headline was stark: "Mother and daughter survived 10 days in Redwood Serenity Park after being abandoned by family." Prosecutors now investigating allegations of fraud and foul play. I watched the report, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. It was surreal to see our faces on the screen, to hear our ordeal recounted in the measured tones of a news anchor. I was stunned, not just by the chilling proximity we had come to vanishing without a trace, but by the breathtaking audacity and speed with which my own family had begun to carve up the life we had supposedly left behind, as if we were already fading ghosts. Our memory a mere inconvenience to their avarice. Agent Thorne contacted Amelia Hayes shortly thereafter. The case, due to its interstate elements and the severity of the financial fraud involved, had been officially referred to federal prosecutors. Ethan Vance, Sophie Vance, and my parents, Clara and Thomas Vance, were all formally listed as persons of interest in an ongoing criminal investigation. Mr. Peterson, the compromised notary, was expected to testify under oath as part of a plea agreement in exchange for his full and truthful cooperation. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was, in a very real sense, just the beginning. A trial was inevitable, and this time, I would be in that courtroom, not as a victim defined by their actions, but as a survivor, ready to reclaim my story and my life. 3 weeks after Lily and I had stumbled out of the wilderness and back into the complicated embrace of civilization, the preliminary hearing convened at the Cedar Ridge County Courthouse. It wasn't the full trial yet, no jury, no final, binding verdict, but it was the crucial juncture where the court would determine if there was sufficient evidence to proceed with formal criminal charges against Ethan, Sophie, and my parents. We arrived early that crisp autumn morning, the air carrying the faint, sweet scent of decaying leaves. Lily sat quietly beside me on a polished wooden bench in the wide, echoing hallway outside the designated courtroom. Her dark hair was neatly plaited, and her favorite, well-loved chapter book rested, unread, on her lap. Her small hand found mine and squeezed it tightly. I couldn't stop my gaze from drifting to the imposing oak door through which we would soon be called, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. We were called in first. Amelia Hayes walked beside me, her presence a calm, reassuring anchor in the turbulent sea of my emotions. The prosecutor, a formidable woman in her early 40s named Ms. Anya Sharma, her dark suit immaculate, like a suit of modern-day armor, presented the state's evidence with a quiet, steely precision. The original note Ethan had left at the campsite, its paper now carefully preserved in an evidence bag. The forged will, naming him as the primary beneficiary of my estate. Official confirmation from the life insurance company that a substantial claim for $750,000 had indeed been filed within days of our supposed disappearance. The detailed report from the forensic handwriting analyst, unequivocally stating that the signature on the new will was a fabrication. Bank logs and email correspondence meticulously detailing Ethan's attempts to access my personal and business accounts and to wrest control of Willow Creek Books and Tea. Then came Mr. Alistair Peterson, the notary. He was a pale, nervous-looking man, his middle-aged face etched with lines of worry, his hands trembling visibly as he took the stand. He admitted, his voice barely a whisper, to notarizing the will without me being present, acknowledging that he had relied on documents and verbal assurances delivered by a third party, a consultant hired by Ethan. Under the weight of the evidence against him, and in exchange for a significantly reduced sentence, he confessed that he had been promised a percentage of the anticipated business profits if the takeover was successful. The prosecution had already secured a binding cooperation agreement with him. Ethan, Sophie, and my parents sat just a few feet away at the defendant's table with their respective legal counsel. Ethan steadfastly avoided my gaze, his face a mask of sullen resentment. Sophie remained outwardly composed, her expression unreadable, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. My father stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. My mother periodically dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but I no longer believed in the sincerity of her tears. They were, I suspected, for the life, the reputation, and the son she was about to lose. The presiding judge, a distinguished older gentleman with clear, discerning eyes and a quiet air of authority, listened intently to all the testimony, his expression thoughtful and grave. After both the prosecution and the defense attorneys had presented their arguments and summaries, he spoke, his voice calm but firm, filling the silent courtroom. Based on the evidence and testimony presented before this court, I find that there is indeed sufficient cause to proceed. This case will move forward to a full trial. A wave of dizziness washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a profound sense of relief. It was a small victory, but a significant one. After the hearing was adjourned, Miss Sharma approached me in the hallway. She offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Thank you for surviving, Mrs. Thorne," she said quietly, her dark eyes holding mine. "Because of your strength, and Lily's, we have the opportunity to hold accountable those who believe a human life can be so easily bartered for a dollar amount." The next day, the media erupted. Headlines screamed from local papers and online news sites, "Abandoned in the wilderness. Mother and daughter expose chilling family plot. The Vance betrayal. Greed, deceit, and a fight for survival in Redwood Serenity Park." From presumed dead to key witnesses, the astonishing story of Alara and Lily Thorne. My phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters. Invitations to appear on morning talk shows and true crime podcasts flooded my email inbox. I declined them all, politely but firmly. I wasn't ready to share the raw, intimate details of our story with a curious public. It was our narrative to shape, in our own time. Instead, Lily and I focused on the quiet, essential act of living. Truly living. We found a small, sun-drenched cottage to rent on the outskirts of Ashwood, a little further from the painful memories associated with our old home. It wasn't grand or imposing, but it had a small, wild garden, and Lily immediately claimed a patch for herself, planting a vibrant array of wildflowers. I planted a single, resilient rose bush in the center of the small lawn, a deep crimson variety, much like the one Liam had carefully tended in our backyard, a quiet homage to his enduring presence in our lives. One soft evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of lavender and rose, Lily curled beside me on the worn wooden porch swing. "Mummy," she asked, her voice thoughtful, Do you think they'll go to prison for what they did?" I paused, considering her question carefully. "It's very likely, sweet pea," I said eventually, choosing my words with care. "Not right away, perhaps, but the wheels of justice are turning. Our truth, is on our side now." She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the darkening garden. Then she whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear her, "I'll never, ever let anyone take you away from me again." I pulled her into my arms, holding her small, warm body close, her heart beating a steady, strong rhythm against mine. "And I will never let anyone harm you, my brave girl," I vowed, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. We knew that the path ahead would not be easy. There would be depositions, more court dates, the painful dredging up of traumatic memories. But we were no longer adrift in a sea of despair. I was not the same grief-stricken, vulnerable woman they had so callously abandoned in the wilderness, the woman they thought they could easily manipulate and erase. And Lily, my resilient Lily, was no longer just the frightened little girl left to the mercy of the elements. We had survived. We had found our footing. We had begun to build something new, something stronger, from the ashes of betrayal. Sometimes, I reflected, family isn't solely defined by the blood that runs in your veins. It's forged in the fires of shared experience, in the unwavering commitment of who chooses you, and who you, in turn, choose to cherish and protect. I chose Lily. She chose me. And in that simple, profound choice, we had discovered an unshakable power. I looked up at the first stars beginning to prick the darkening canvas of the sky and whispered, more to myself than to anyone else, we're home. We're safe. We're together. And that, in the end, is all that truly matters. 8 long months after that pivotal preliminary hearing, the trial finally commenced. It stretched over 3 painstaking weeks, each day a fresh wave of emotional attrition. Witnesses were called, their testimonies dissected under cross-examination. Forensic experts meticulously analyzed signatures, financial records, and digital communications. Emails and text messages, once private, were read aloud in the stark, public arena of the courtroom, their contents laying bare the chilling premeditation of my family's actions. Lily's name, and the trauma she had endured, was mentioned more than once, a sharp ache in my heart each time. But as I had fiercely vowed, she never had to set foot in that courtroom, never had to relive her ordeal under the cold scrutiny of strangers. Amelia and Miss Sharma had ensured her deposition, taken in a far gentler setting, was sufficient. After 4 arduous days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Ethan Vance was found guilty on multiple counts: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, attempted unlawful conversion of assets, and felony child endangerment. His sentence, 15 years in a federal penitentiary, with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 10. Sophie Vance was convicted of conspiracy to commit mail fraud, document forgery, and aiding and abetting insurance fraud. She received a sentence of 12 years, eligible for parole after 8. My parents, Clara and Thomas Vance, were both found guilty as accessories to the fraud, specifically charged with knowingly participating in the fabrication of death claims and attempting to obtain insurance funds under false pretenses. Each received a sentence of 10 years, with eligibility for parole in 6. The case, with its sensational elements of familial betrayal and wilderness survival, made national headlines. But the clamor of the media, the shocked whispers, the judgmental pronouncements, none of it touched me deeply anymore. The story, their version of it, no longer held any power over me. It was our story now, Lily's and mine, a testament to resilience, not a chronicle of victimhood. In the quiet aftermath, Lily and I began, truly, to begin again. We made pancakes on lazy weekend mornings, the scent of cinnamon and maple syrup filling our little cottage. We picked sun-ripened strawberries at a local farm, our fingers stained red, our laughter echoing in the summer air. We watched old movies, curled up together on the sofa with an oversized bowl of popcorn, Liam's favorite silly comedies that still made us smile through a sheen of gentle tears. Lily discovered a passion for painting, her canvases exploding with vibrant colors, her imagination taking flight. And I, Alara, who had once felt like starlight extinguished, started to smile again, genuinely, from a place deep within. The scars, both visible and invisible, didn't vanish entirely. Some wounds, I learned, leave their mark forever. But they gradually stopped aching with such an acute, persistent pain. We remembered Liam, not with the sharp agony of fresh loss, but with a tender, loving warmth, his spirit woven into the fabric of our new lives. We remembered the darkness of the woods, but we chose not to dwell there. Forgiveness, I came to understand, is a complex, deeply personal journey. It is not a prerequisite for healing, nor is it owed. But freedom, freedom from bitterness, freedom from the shackles of the past, freedom to embrace the future with an open heart, that is essential. And that Lily and I, we found. We found it in the quiet strength of our bond, in the resilience of the human spirit, and in the enduring beauty of a world that, despite its capacity for darkness, still held so much light.